Welcome back to Empty Plates, Full Stories. I'm Lindley Amick,
And I'm Holland Morris.
and today we're interviewing.
My name is Tommy Housman. I'm an instructor of education and student media advisor here at the University of Evansville.
Okay, great. Let's jump right into it, Tommy. When people hear the term food insecurity, what does it actually look like in real life for families in Evansville?
So it kind of looks like living check to check and paying all your bills and not quite having enough money left over to get enough healthy food. It's access to healthy food. Sometimes it looks like not being able to get to the store. It's a transportation issue. Sometimes it's not knowing how to cook and prepare food and store food. There's a variety of things. Sometimes people think about food insecurity. They just think that they can't buy food, but sometimes it's not knowing how to open a can of vegetables, like a can of green beans. Sometimes people just don't know how to use a can opener because they never have before. And then there's how to use a knife properly, how to cook and prepare the food, how to store it properly after you cook it. But a lot of it is that transportation and that everything's really expensive in our life. So 44% of people in our town, not just our town, but mostly this is a consistent percentage throughout the entire United States, live below the Alice line, which means that they have a job, maybe even two, they pay all their bills, but they don't quite have enough to like really thrive. And so they're struggling a little bit check to check. So that means they might not have enough food, and especially healthy food, to last their next paycheck.
So, what are some common misconceptions about who struggles to access food?
I think there is a big misconception because it's everybody. So, like here at the university, um, you would think that a private college that everybody has food and everybody can eat, everybody has access to it, but that's not the case. The case is that a lot of people have trouble getting access to healthy food on this campus. Sometimes, like both of you are athletes, it's just a matter of managing your time that lines up with when Ridgeway is open for food.
Mm-hmm.
So you also have students that are here on scholarships, students that might not be as come from as wealthy backgrounds as you would think being at a private school. And then sometimes it's just, students don't manage their money well. But it's also that that knowledge that I was talking about before, preparing um, and storage. There's a breakdown there, depending on where they came from. Parents don't always think maybe I should have taught my kids how to cook. I mean, it's something that happens a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
my mom spent a lot of time teaching me how to cook, and I'm really surprised when I talk to people when their parents didn't teach them how to cook. But it happens a lot, apparently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's interesting you bring that up about like being athletes and students on campus because a lot of the time people don't know how to cook, but we also don't know how to use the resources we have at hand. So for example, like if we're in a dorming situation and we don't have certain cooking materials or like the kitchen's being used, then you're kind of out of luck. Like it's kind of hard to figure out what to do with yourself when you have a million other things going on, like with your schedule and whatnot. So you're a communications professor here at the university. From your education background and from a communication perspective, why do you think food insecurity is often misunderstood or overlooked?
I think that we have the mentality in this country to blame the victim.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you've ever heard this term, but people say pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? But if you ever actually tried to like pull yourself up off the ground from your bootstraps, you'll just kind of like roll around on the ground because it's not really possible unless you have a really good core. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense. The euphemism doesn't make a lot of sense, and plus it doesn't make a lot of sense in our society. Our society is set up for failure. It really is. It's set up to where you have to put yourself in debt to get anything or get anywhere. So people blame the victim, but the truth is almost half of us are struggling. And I think a lot of these people that are struggling at the top don't really see themselves as struggling sometimes. So it's easy to convince people that they're not experiencing hardship when they actually are.
Mhm.
Um, what was the question again? Because I got a little off.
Just from your perspective, from a communication or a marketing perspective.
Yeah, I was still on the right track. I
Yeah.
just forgot what my point was. So yeah, there's lots of aspects to like even completely understanding what it is. All the points that I've mentioned so far, people don't really think about those things. So me, I know how to cook. I know how to prepare food. I've prepared food all my life. I've worked at restaurants. I've done all kinds of different jobs that involve food. I enjoy cooking. Um, so I might just think that's common knowledge. I don't, because I've been trained to critically think and analyze situations and how people behave. So I know that that's not the case, but other people might say, like, what do you mean you don't know how to drive? What do you mean you don't know where to find a banana? What do you mean you don't know how to use a can opener? I mean, you can cook that in the microwave. Didn't you know that? Just those simple things like that.
Mm.
I think that we are wrapped up in our own perception of reality. And sometimes it's hard to step outside yourself and understand another person's struggle. And it's also like like I said, we put this personal accountability on people, like they should be able to take care of themselves. But the truth is, our society is set up to where it is very complicated to take care of yourself.
Mhm.
So,
So, along with the fact that it is hard to take care of ourselves, so like what is the biggest factor contributing to the food insecurity locally? Like is it the rising food prices, transportation, wages, or is it like anything else?
I'm glad that you brought up transportation. Transportation is a big part of the issue. We do not have a really good public transportation system in town, so much so that another group in our class is concentrating on transportation. So transportation and food insecurity go hand in hand. Having this complete street out here on Walnut is really, really great. But let's think about the complete street that they chose to make first. What does it lead to? It leads to downtown. And then in downtown leads to a park, a recreational facility, right over here at the state grounds. Is there a grocery store on that strip?
Mm-mm.
No, there's not. So yes, it's beautiful. Yes, it's convenient for people of means, for people of money, people who can afford bicycles, people that recreationally ride bicycles instead of because they have to. Because the people that have to ride a bicycle to maybe get to a store or walk or have to walk to get to a store, there's no store. It's downtown, which there's some restaurants down there, but there's no affordable place to get food like fresh fruit and vegetables. And there's no place on the other end of it either. When it comes to thinking about how to outline a city, we don't think about those things either. We're just like, oh, we think about the people of means. We think about cars. We're a car centric place. So we don't have all the things that we need in place for our citizens to access the things they need. Oh, well, just buy a car. Just get yourself a car. And that's easier said than done. When I mean, I have a. I'll just mix my personal experience in here. I have a car. It's $525 a month to pay for that car. I don't want to pay for that car. I hate paying for that car, especially since I live right there. But if I didn't have that car payment, so much things would be freed up. But I am in a position where I'm able to afford it and deal with that struggle. So, but then there's people that $525, that's their whole budget. It's probably more than their whole budget for food for a month.
Mm.
So transportation is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I could definitely agree with that. I think it's important, especially in cities that aren't as walkable or bigger cities. Like when you say big cities, people think New York and there's tons of public transportation there. But cities in California or like Las Vegas, where I'm from, it takes 20 minutes to walk to a grocery store just from your house. And it's just because everything is it's like compact, but it's spread out at the same time and it's built for a
Mm-hmm.
car only lifestyle, which is really hard for some people to afford.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that food insecurity impacts people hunger wise and purchasing food and whatnot. But how would you say that it affects just beyond hunger, like mental health or well being, education or family life or things like that?
Well, I think that's a big aspect of it. So I've worked in food insecurity for about 10 years. I was on the board of a prevalent not-for-profit in town that was dedicated to combating food insecurity and trying to make healthy food accessible to everyone. And it's a very big issue. And part of the reason that I did that is because whenever I went through my divorce and before I went back to school and ended up here, I had a very big problem with food insecurity. I experienced food insecurity, and it was it affected my mental health. It affected my ability to communicate with people. It affected it still affects me today. If I don't have access to food, I kind of freak out a little bit. Like, when am I going to eat? How am I going to eat? Still, that mindset is still in my head. How am I going to fit that in? Also, at that time, I had surgeries, so there was only a certain kind of food that I could afford, and that's high carb, low
Mhm.
protein. So lots of frozen pizzas, lots of spaghetti. Spaghetti's a dollar at that time was $1, and you could get for $2.50 you could get spaghetti, right?
Mhm.
So that's what I ate a lot. I ate a lot of that kind of stuff, and then I was also prone, which I'm laying down a lot because I had surgeries. I had 4 surgeries inside of 3 years. I gained a lot of weight. So I went to food banks, and food banks were full of non-perishable items, high salt, high carb, no good protein sources, no good vegetable sources. So all that stuff that I was eating during that time caused me to have health problems on top of my health problems. Then the mental stress of like trying to figure out how I was going to eat, what I was going to eat, how I was going to make it last on a limited budget occupied my entire life. So as soon as I started to see a path towards improvement in my life, I was like, how can I fix this system?
Mhm.
And I started trying to figure that out and give back to that system.
Mhm.
Mhm. Wow, that's just like really powering.
Yeah.
So as a communications professor, so like what role do the storytelling and media play in shaping how communities respond to issues like food insecurity?
So I think that it plays a big role in when we think about how to critically think about situations. I think victim blaming is one of the biggest problems. And so if we talk about tell these stories of people, and like me getting up here just telling you my story is a big help because it helps people understand that maybe the system is broken a little bit. Maybe it's not because income hasn't really gone up a lot for people and prices keep going up. So I make more money now than I ever have in my entire life, and we still struggle with like making our budget get all 4 weeks of the month to have the kind of food that we want to have.
Mhm.
And when I say want to have, I mean healthy food, because that's what we want. We want food that is going to help us live longer. So sharing those stories and just be healthy in general, just be able to like be active. So the stories that you want to share, I think, are the most important is how our system is set up. So whenever you want to get food from a place like a food bank or a food pantry, most of the time you have to share personal information,
Mhm.
and they keep track of it. They make you feel like you're doing something wrong, like you've done something wrong, and like you have to give this, and then they tell you, you can't come back for 30 days.
Mm.
So they give you this food that is not healthy most of the time, probably not very helpful, and doesn't go but for a week. So they give you probably a week's worth of food, not even a week's worth of food. And you have to give them all this information. And you already feel bad about it because you've had to ask for help. And the food that they're giving you is not healthy. And then then they tell you this is only going to last you a week, but you can't come back for 30 days. So then you have to find another place, and it's the same story. And there's not enough places in town to make you get through the entire place. So I once worked at a booth to where we were giving away free food and help and things to help people, and people were leery of coming up and taking anything without telling us their name or email.
Mhm.
Mhm.
They were like surprised that we didn't want anything in return. And I think that moment for me was really messed up because they expected to have to give me something to just get a snack that was
Mm.
healthy.
Yeah.
Um, there's stories like that all around, especially When we talk about transportation, there is 25% of our town, Evansville, Indiana, lives within like 35%, 25 to 35% live within a food desert, which means that they don't have access with transportation wise. There's no food to like within a mile. So within a mile of their house, there's no place to get affordable food. And then you start thinking about, transportation again, right? So you telling that story, you're telling that story about transportation, you're telling that story about knowledge, about knowing how to cook. And I think if we share all those things, maybe we stop looking at it as a problem of failure, personal failure, and start looking at, oh, this is a systemic failure of our society. So if we can get that across and communicate that, then we can actually start fixing the problem. And I'm happy to share like how I think we should fix that problem too.
You beat me to my next question.
Yeah.
So, if someone listening hears these stories and wants to help or wants to start fixing the problem, what's one action that you could say they could take to make a difference?
So every single public school system that we have a lot of public schools here, right?
Mm.
Every single one of our public schools should have some sort of indoor growing facility, aquaponics, aeroponics, or some sort of indoor growing. I think that we're going to have to go to indoor growing anyway because we don't have topsoil anymore. We get, if you've been watching the news lately, there's some transportation issues across the globe because there's a unnecessary war.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this thing called potash, right? And that's part of what we get from, like, we get a lot of ours from Canada. So you wouldn't want to put a whole bunch of tariffs on Canada because that's where we get our potash from, which is what we use to make fertilizer, which is what we use to grow food, right?
Mm-hmm.
So so at that point, I kind of got off track a little bit, but you need to have good relations. We have to have good world relations to deal with part of it. But so we have to, and since we have to do that, and since we have to do that, it's because we've wasted all of our own topsoil. We've already washed it all away. We've used it up over and over and over again. So we have to make our own topsoil in order to grow our food. So that's going to continue to get worse. And plus, since we have to make our own topsoil, that soil washes off into our waterways. So all that high nitrate and high um, stuff gets into the water system. It pollutes our water system that we have to clean, which costs us more money, and then often will poison fish and stuff like that. So with that, we're limiting ourselves to where we can't consume our local fish because we've poisoned them, and we can't, and we have to pay a lot more money to filter our water out. So indoor growing, I think, is the future. But if we start with at elementary schools and middle schools and high schools to where they are having some sort of indoor growing facility and they're being taught how to grow food from the beginning. So from growing to their plate, they call it farm to table, but this would be indoor farming. So indoor farming to table, and teach them how to grow food, take care of the food, and then process that food and cook that food, eat that food, and store that food. Starting early, every single kid has to eat lunch at their school. What if that food was offset by some sort of indoor growing facility like we now have here on campus?
Mm.
I believe you'll be talking to Scott Massey soon, and he'll tell you all about indoor growing facilities and what they might look like and what that might mean for the future.
Mm-hmm.
It is, I think it's a very big part of it. I also think that there's no reason that we should have Bradford pears everywhere, which we do because everybody thought they were pretty in the 1980s and 1990s. So they planted them everywhere and they're growing everywhere, but they don't bear fruit. They're called a pear tree, but they don't have any fruit. They're just pretty, and then they cause really bad allergies. So, which is, if you're not from here, you understand that this time of year sucks here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So,
100%.
Yeah.
and what if we had food growing publicly instead? What if we had apple trees? What if we had orange trees? Or whatever it is that can grow here? Pear and apple do very well in this area. Why don't we have pear and apple trees publicly for people to eat from? And why can't we facilitate some sort of management that takes care of those trees to make sure that people can just eat a pear, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the thing about food is that most of it comes from the ground. We've occupied our time now where we spend most of our time at work. In the past, when this country was being formed, you spent most of your time growing your own food so you had something to eat. We can't do that anymore. We can grow some tomatoes, right? You got some tomatoes on the porch, you got some peppers, maybe a little hobby garden. That's all you have time for, and that's not going to feed you. So we have to think about how we're going to grow food. Where do we get that food from? We should be supplying ourselves locally with food. So we should have edible gardens. We should have indoor growing. And we should stop treating food pantries like a place to put all the stuff that we don't want to give to people. This processed canned food, I understand the need for giving food away. I understand that we need to do that right now, and I understand food pantries are a staple for people, but it's a band-aid to the problem, and it makes the problem worse. So when you causes high carb, high salt food is going to cause weight gain, which is going to cause more health problems, including diabetes. So we're just actually making the problem worse. So what if instead of food pantries, we had indoor growing facilities? They spend a lot of money to have all these different food pantries. What if they diverted some of that money into actually growing fresh fruit and vegetables instead?
Mm-hmm.
I think that we're just so stuck in our ways that we don't think critically about how to attack this situation. We have so many abandoned buildings in town that one of them could easily be turned into a municipal indoor growing facility.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Well, that is all the questions that we had today. So thank you so much for joining us on Empty Plates, Full Stories. And that is the concluded podcast for today. So stay tuned for next. Thanks.